Welcome to the Listen and Sleep channel. Today we'll journey through time and space to ancient China, where among misty mountains and quiet valleys, one of humanity's most profound books was born. Get comfortable, close your eyes, allow your breathing to become slow and deep. Let your body relax and your mind immerse itself in the atmosphere of distant times, when wisdom was transmitted through the whisper of wind and the murmur of mountain streams. Imagine a world where each morning begins with silence, where time moves slowly, like clouds over mountain peaks, where people still remember how to listen to nature's heart. Now we'll travel to where 2,500 years ago, a man was born who gave the world a book of 81 short verses, a book that speaks of the way of all things, of how to live in harmony with life's flow, of wisdom that comes not from knowledge, but from understanding. Breathe calmly and let this story carry you to a world where wisdom is born from silence. Everything begins with silence. Deep, primordial silence that existed before the first words, before the first thoughts, before the first breath of a newborn. In this silence, where there's not yet separation into day and night, into you and me, into right and wrong, something is born that's impossible to name, but possible to feel. Ancient Chinese called this Tao, the way, the flow, that which moves everything without moving itself. Imagine China in the Zhou dynasty era, the 6th century before our era, a world where emperors consider themselves sons of heaven, where every stone, every tree is filled with spirit, where people still know how to talk with the wind. Morning comes slowly through mist rising from the great yellow river, Huanghe. Water carries silt from distant mountains, creating fertile valleys where rice grows and where cities are built from clay and wood. In one such valley, where pines whisper with bamboo and cranes dance over lakes, a child is born. No one knows exactly when this happened. Perhaps in spring, when peach trees bloom in white clouds. Perhaps in autumn, when maple leaves turn red like the sunset sky. Time here flows differently, unhurried, not counting minutes and years, but following the rhythm of heart, rhythm of breath, rhythm of seasons changing. This child will be called Laozi, old teacher, though perhaps this is not a name, but simply a way to say sage, one who knows. But what does he know? And where does his knowledge come from? Perhaps from the silence that surrounds him from birth, from observing how dew drops become streams, streams become rivers, rivers become sea, and how sea again becomes clouds, clouds become rain, rain becomes dew. This boy's childhood passes in a world that still remembers magic, where every stone can be home to a spirit, where every tree keeps the wind's history. He grows among people who work with their hands, who know when to sow and when to harvest, who understand the language of animals and birds. Simple truths surround him. The sun rises in the east. Water flows downward. Everything born dies. Everything that dies is born again. But in these simple truths, the boy begins to see something deeper, something difficult to express in words. He notices how mother prepares food, how she doesn't fuss, doesn't hurry, but everything happens on time. How father works in the field, how he doesn't fight with earth, but cooperates with it. How rain doesn't try to water plants by force, but simply falls. And plants themselves reach toward it with roots. In these observations, understanding is born. There's a way to do without forcing. There's a way to be strong while remaining caught. There's a way to lead by following. But for now, these are only feelings, barely perceptible, like jasmine fragrance in evening air, like sound of distant flute that might be music or might be bird singing. The boy spends hours sitting by a stream. He watches how water flows around stones, how it doesn't fight obstacles, doesn't try to move them, but finds a way around. And gradually, drop by drop, year by year, the hardest stone becomes smooth. Water defeats stone, but this is victory without battle. This is victory of patience, constancy, softness. Sometimes in evening, when sun sets behind mountains and world fills with golden light, the boy lies on grass and looks at sky. Clouds move slowly, changing shapes, transforming from dragons to mountains, from mountains to flowers, from flowers back to clouds. Nothing remains unchanged. Everything flows, everything transforms into something else. But there's something that remains, something that doesn't change among all changes, the very capacity for change, the very principle of flow. Years pass. The boy becomes youth. His mind is sharp, memory good. He studies writing, learns to read ancient texts. But most of all, he learns from nature, from water that teaches softness and constancy, from mountains that teach patience and stability, from wind that teaches freedom and lightness, from earth that teaches acceptance and generosity. Parents see that their son is different from others. He can sit for hours in silence, watching ants or watching leaves fall into pond. He asks strange questions. Why do people suffer if everything in nature flows easily and naturally? Why do rulers make war if heaven and earth live in peace? Why do people talk so much if the most important things happen in silence? These questions have no simple answers. Or perhaps the answers are so simple they're hard to see. Like air we don't notice while breathing. Like silence we don't hear beyond the noise of thoughts. Like the way that's always here, but we don't see because we seek something complex. The youth understands that to find answers to his questions, he needs to leave his native village, needs to see the world, learn how other people live, study ancestral wisdom. And so he sets out on a journey, not as conqueror or merchant, but as seeker of truth, one who wants to understand what life is and how to live it correctly. The road leads through mountains and valleys, through cities and villages. He sees different people, hears different stories, sees rich and poor, wise and foolish, happy and unhappy. And gradually, understanding ripens in him. All people seek the same thing: peace, calm, happiness, meaning. But they seek it in the wrong place. They seek in the external world what can only be found within. They seek in movement what lives in stillness. The journey brings him to the capital, to a great city where sages and officials live, where there's a library with ancient books, where the wisdom of ages is kept. Here he'll find work. Here he'll continue his education. Here he'll begin to understand that true wisdom is not in knowing many words, but in understanding what's behind words. Not in studying the way, but in walking it. The road home leads not backward, but forward, into silence deeper than all words, into understanding simpler than all knowledge, into the way that begins where all ways end, into Tao that cannot be named but can be lived. The capital greets the youth with noise and bustle. Here, everything is different from his quiet village. People hurry, speak loudly, argue, compete with each other. Streets are full of merchants, officials, soldiers. Air is thick with smoke and dust. Sky seems distant, almost unreachable beyond roofs of houses and palaces. But the youth doesn't get lost in this chaos. He remembers water's lessons, how it flows around obstacles, doesn't fight, but finds its way. He moves through the city calmly, attentively, not resisting the flow of people, but not losing himself in it. He's like a leaf on wind that dances with wind, but remains a leaf. He manages to find work in the Imperial Library, a place where ancient scrolls are kept, where history of dynasties is recorded, philosophers' wisdom, laws and decrees of rulers. Here it's quiet. Here it smells of parchment and ink. Here time flows slowly, measuredly, like the breathing of a sleeping dragon. The work of archive keeper seems simple. Maintain order, help scholars find needed texts, copy ancient scrolls that begin to deteriorate from time. But for a young man accustomed to seeing depth in simple things, this work becomes a window into humanity's soul. He reads chronicles of rulers, stories of victories and defeats, rises and falls of dynasties. He sees how power changes people, how it comes and goes, how what seemed eternal turns out to be temporary. Wise emperors created prosperity. Cruel ones brought country to chaos. But what made some wise and others cruel? In ancient texts, he finds philosophers' reflections on human nature, on justice, on how to govern a state. Some say people must be governed strictly through laws and punishments. Others believe in natural human goodness, that one need only not interfere with people being themselves. Days pass in reading and reflection. The young archive keeper immerses himself in the wisdom of ages. But the more he reads, the more questions arise in his mind. Why are there so many words about wisdom, but so little real wisdom in the world? Why do people who know how to live correctly live incorrectly? Why doesn't knowledge lead to understanding? He begins to notice a pattern. The wisest texts are short. They don't explain much, but make you think. They don't give ready answers, but help ask right questions. They don't say what to do, but how to look. Not how to live, but how to be. He's especially drawn to texts about nature, about how heaven and earth interact with each other, how 4 seasons replace each other in eternal dance, how all things are born, grow, reach maturity, and return to source. Here there's no violence, no struggle, but there's constant movement, constant change, constant harmony. In evenings, when the library closes and city plunges into twilight, the young man climbs to the building's roof. From here, the whole city is visible, but also mountains on horizon, stars in sky, moon that slowly moves along its path. Here, between earthly and heavenly, he feels at home. He begins to practice what will later be called a meditation. But for him, it's simply returning to natural state, to sit quietly, to breathe calmly, to observe what happens in mind without interfering, without judging, without trying to change anything, simply to watch how clouds of thoughts come and go. In these moments of silence, insights come to him, not as bright flashes, but as dawn, slow, soft, natural. He begins to understand that humanity's problem is not lack of knowledge, but excess of effort. People try too hard to be happy, therefore become unhappy. Try too hard to be wise, therefore become foolish. Try too hard to control life, therefore lose control. What if we try the opposite? What if we stop trying so hard? What if we trust the natural flow of things? What if we learn to act without forcing, to be strong while remaining soft, to lead by following, These thoughts don't come as theories or concepts. They come as living experience. When he stops fighting sleepiness while reading, he understands text better. When he stops forcing himself to memorize information, it memorizes itself. When he stops trying to impress colleagues, they begin to respect him. Small discoveries lead to great understanding. There's a way to live that requires less effort, but gives more results. There's a way to be that doesn't contradict nature, but follows it. There's a way that leads nowhere, because it's already here. Years in library pass like one long morning, calmly, measuredly, fully. The young keeper becomes a mature man, but wisdom comes to him not from age, but from simplicity. He learns to see complex in simple and simple in complex. Learns to read between lines, not only in books, but in life. And gradually, understanding ripens in him of what will become the foundation of his teaching. There's something that rules the world without ruling it, that moves everything without moving itself, that creates everything without creating anything. Ancients called this by different names, but he'll find his own word for it. Tao, the way, that which cannot be named, but can be lived. One morning, the archive keeper climbs to the library roof, as he's done every day for many years. Sun rises from behind mountains, painting sky in shades of gold and pink. City still sleeps. Only roosters greet new day. Only smoke rises from chimneys of few houses where people have already awakened. But today something is different. Air is especially clear, silence especially deep. And in this silence, in this light, in this moment between world sleep and awakening, something happens that's impossible to describe in words, but that changes everything. This is not a vision, not a voice, not revelation in the ordinary sense. It's more like if a veil he didn't know he was wearing suddenly fell. As if all his life he'd looked at world through murky glass, and now glass became transparent. Everything remains the same. Mountains, sky, city, birds. But simultaneously, everything becomes completely different. He sees connections between all things. How breath connects him with plants that release oxygen, how sun is connected with rain, rain with earth, earth with plants, plants with animals, animals with people. Everything is connected with everything in an infinite network of relationships, in eternal dance of interactions. And in the center of this dance, like the motionless center of a spinning wheel, there's something that doesn't move, but thanks to which all movement is possible. Something that doesn't act, but thanks to which all action is possible. Something that has no form, but thanks to which all forms are possible. Ancient sages tried to name this. They said, great unity, first cause, absolute. But all these words are too heavy, too solemn for something simpler than breath, more natural than morning dew. And then a word comes, simple and capacious, Tao, the way. Not way as road from one point to another, but way as manner of being. Like river doesn't strive toward sea, but simply flows, following terrain. Like plant doesn't try to grow, but simply grows, following its nature. Like heart doesn't force itself to beat, but simply beats, following rhythm of life. In this understanding, there's no ecstasy, no shock. There's deep peace, as if he finally returned home after long wandering, as if he found what he'd been seeking all his life, and it turned out it was always here, always was part of him, always was him himself. Sun rises higher, city awakens, new day begins. But for him, this day is unlike any other, not because something changed in world, but because his view of world changed. Now he sees Tao in everything, in bird's flight and leaf's fall, in child's laughter and old man's tears, in birth and in death, in movement and in stillness. And with this understanding comes desire to share, not to preach, not to teach, not to convince, but simply to tell about what he saw. In simple words, like telling fairy tales to children. In short phrases, like writing recipes or instructions. In images from nature, understandable to everyone who has ever seen water, mountains, sky. He takes brush, grinds ink, unfolds clean scroll and begins to write. First lines come by themselves, as if he's not composing them, but simply recording what he always knew, but couldn't express. Tao that can be expressed in words is not the true Tao. Name that can be named is not the true name. Nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. Named is the mother of all things. Words fall onto paper easily, naturally. He doesn't think about how to arrange them, how to connect them with each other. They flow like water from mountain, finding their own way. Every word is necessary, every pause significant, every line opens new facet of understanding. He's not writing a book in the ordinary sense. He's writing a guide to life, but one that doesn't give ready answers, but helps find them yourself. He's writing a map of terrain, but one that shows not roads, but the very principle of orientation. He's writing a song, but one that everyone must sing with their own voice. 81 short verses. No more, no less. As if Tao itself determines how many words are needed to say about what cannot be said in words. Each verse is a drop, but in each drop, the entire ocean is reflected. Each verse is a seed, but from each seed, an entire tree of understanding can grow. He writes about soft and hard, about empty and full, about how to win without fighting and how to lead without forcing. He writes about water that's softest in world, but defeats hardest. About valley that's fertile precisely because it's lower than hills. About door that's useful by its emptiness, not by material from which it's made. This is not philosophical treatise and not religious text. This is practical guide to art of living, to art of being yourself without pretending to be someone else, to art of acting without straining, to art of influencing without forcing, to art of being strong while remaining soft. Each verse can be understood on different levels, as advice to ruler about how to govern country, as guidance for person about how to govern their life, as instruction to seeker of truth about how to find way to understanding. Words are the same, but each reader will find in them what they need. Work on book proceeds without hurry. Sometimes one verse is born in a day. Sometimes several days go into finding the only right word. Sometimes finished verse must be rewritten anew because a simpler way appears to say the same thing. Simplicity is not ease, but perfection. Like sculptor doesn't add something to stone, but removes everything unnecessary. So he removes from text everything that's not essential. Every word is tested by silence. Every phrase is weighed by stillness. Every verse is born from the same source as Tao itself, from emptiness that's fuller than any fullness. Gradually, people gather around him. First colleagues from library who notice he's changed, become even calmer, even wiser, but at the same time simpler and more accessible. Then scholars and officials who hear about what he's writing. Then simple people who feel in him something special, something that helps them better understand their own life. He doesn't create school, doesn't declare himself teacher, doesn't demand worship or payment for knowledge. He simply shares what he understood, answers questions if asked, helps if asked for help, but most often he simply lives. And this life is enough for others to understand essence of his teaching. People begin to call him sage, but he laughs at this. Sage is one who knows that he knows nothing. Teacher is one who learns from every person he meets. Saint is one who doesn't consider himself better than others. He's simply a person who found a way to live in accord with natural order of things. And this way cannot be taught, can only be shown how it works. His teaching without teaching begins to spread, not through sermons and missionary work, but through living example. Those who understand essence of Tao begin to live differently, more calmly, more wisely, more happily. And their calm is transmitted to others, like warmth is transmitted from one candle to another without diminishing first flame. The book is finished, but work is only beginning. Now it's necessary not only to write about Tao, but to live in accordance with it, to show that wisdom of verses is not just beautiful words, but real way of life. That teaching about non-action is not inaction, but action without forcing. That softness is stronger than hardness, not in theory, but in practice. And he lives, day by day, year by year. Not like saint on pedestal, but like ordinary person who found unusual way to be ordinary, who learned to swim with life's current, not resisting it, but not losing direction, who understood that shortest way home is sometimes longest, and simplest answer is sometimes most complex. His life becomes continuation of his book. Each day a new page, each action a new verse. And those who are near him learn to read this living book, written not with ink on paper, but with presence in world, attention to moment, love for all that is. So teaching is born that is not teaching, way that leads nowhere because it's already here, wisdom that's not in knowledge but in understanding, Tao that cannot be named but can be lived. And in this life, simple as breath and deep as sky, is hidden secret of true happiness. Secret that everyone must discover themselves, but that's impossible to discover alone. There's a truth that can only be seen with child's eyes. Truth that the strongest thing in world is softest. That victor is not one who attacks, but one who accepts. That water that yields to everything eventually wears away hardest stone. This truth lives in every movement of nature, in every breath of wind, in every drop of rain. The sage, now called Laozi, spends days in observation, not as scientist who wants to classify and explain everything, but as child who simply looks and marvels. He sees how grass bends under wind but doesn't break, how water goes around stone but eventually makes it smooth, how young tree branches are flexible and alive while old ones are hard and dead. In human world, everything is opposite. People value hardness, rigidity, inflexibility. Strong is considered one who can break another. Wise is one who knows many facts. Successful is one who captured many territories or accumulated much gold. But why then are such people often unhappy? Why does their hardness lead to brittleness, their knowledge to confusion, their successes to loneliness? The answer comes one morning when he looks at lake. Water surface is absolutely calm, like mirror. In it, sky is reflected, clouds, flying birds. Water doesn't try to hold these reflections, doesn't cling to them, but accepts everything that comes and releases everything that goes. And precisely because of this, it can reflect true beauty of world. And what happens when wind rises? Water doesn't resist it. It dances with it, creating waves and ripples. Reflections disappear, but a different beauty appears, of movement, of play of light, of living breath, of element. Water remains water, both in stillness and in movement. Its strength is not in resisting changes, but in remaining itself through any changes. Stone on lake bottom is also beautiful. It's stable, reliable, constant, but it cannot move, cannot adapt, cannot grow. When conditions change, it can only be destroyed. Its hardness is simultaneously its strength and its weakness. People want to be like stone, constant, unchanging, controlling. But life flows like water. It doesn't ask permission for changes. It simply flows. And one who tries to stop it breaks, while one who learns to flow with it gains true strength. This strength is not in muscles and not in weapons. It's an ability to accept what is and gently direct it in needed direction. Like mother, who doesn't force child, but creates conditions in which he himself will want to do right things. Like gardener, who doesn't force plants to grow, but waters them, loosens soil, removes weeds. The sage begins to apply this principle in his life. When someone is rude to him, he doesn't respond with rudeness, but doesn't become victim. He simply remains calm, like lake that reflects both anger and kindness with equal clarity. His calm often acts more powerfully than any words. Aggression, meeting no resistance, dissolves itself. When supervisors assign him difficult work, he doesn't complain and doesn't resist, but doesn't work through force. He finds a way to do work easily and naturally, like water finds way down slope. Often it turns out that what seemed difficult can be done simply if you don't fight circumstances, but use them. When people ask his advice, he doesn't give ready recipes. Instead, he asks questions that help person find answer themselves. Because advice that comes from outside, like imposed medicine, may help or may harm, but wisdom born from within always heals because it precisely fits this person in this situation. People begin to notice that near him it becomes easier. Not because he does something, but because he doesn't do anything unnecessary. He doesn't try to change others, doesn't judge, doesn't give unsolicited advice. He simply is present. And in this presence, there's such deep acceptance that people themselves begin to change. This is the art of non-action, Wu-Wei, as followers call it. Not inaction, but action without forcing. Not laziness, but efficiency without tension. Not indifference, but love without attachment. A way to be useful to world without trying to fix it. The sage understands that strength of softness is not only philosophical principle, but practical art. He begins to teach this art to those ready to learn, not through lectures and rules, but through living example and simple exercises. Sit by stream, he tells student. Observe how water flows around obstacles. Don't analyze, don't explain, just look. Feel how this works. Then try to apply same principle in conversation with difficult person. Don't argue. Don't prove your rightness. Just flow around their aggression, like water flows around stone. Breathe as child breathes, naturally and freely. Don't control breath, let it flow itself. Feel how with each exhale, tension leaves, and with each inhale, freshness comes. This is Wu-Wei in simplest form, non-action that allows life to flow through you without obstacles. Walk slowly, especially when you're hurrying. Notice how haste creates bustle, and bustle creates mistakes. Slowness is not loss of time, but its economy. One who hurries often arrives later than one who walks measuredly, and arrives more tired and less ready for what awaits. Speak less, listen more. In silence, between words, often more wisdom is hidden than in words themselves. When you speak, you repeat what you already know. When you listen, you can learn something new. And when you're silent, you can hear what life itself says. These simple practices don't require special conditions or special preparation. They can be performed everywhere and always. At work, and at home, in crowd and alone, in joy and in sorrow. They don't separate person from ordinary life, but help live this life more consciously and harmoniously. Gradually, the sage's students themselves become teachers, not because they received some diploma or initiation, but because they learned to live in accord with Tao. Their calm is contagious. Their wisdom is practical. Their strength is based not on forcing, but on understanding. So teaching about soft strength spreads like circles on water from thrown stone, slowly, naturally, without violence and propaganda. Everyone who understands this principle becomes living example of its action, and this example speaks louder than any words. In a world where speed and aggression are valued, hardness and control, an alternative appears. Way of soft strength, natural action, harmony with life's flow. Way that doesn't contradict other ways, but simply offers different means of achieving same goals: peace, happiness, success, understanding. And it turns out this way is not only possible, but also more effective. That softness really is stronger than hardness. That acceptance leads to greater changes than resistance. That love conquers fear not in beautiful theories, but in practical life of every day. Return begins not from place where you are now, but from who you consider yourself to be. Most people think they're complex beings in complex world, that life is set of problems to solve, goals to achieve, roles to play. But what if all this is only layers? What if under all these layers something very simple and pure is hidden? The sage often observes children, how they play without thinking about result, how they rejoice in simple things: sunbeam on wall, butterfly, fallen leaf, how they cry openly when hurt and laugh from whole heart when happy. In them, there's no falseness, no calculation, no attempt to impress. They simply are. Adults call this naivety and teach children to be serious, practical, realistic. Teach to hide emotions, plan future, analyze past. And gradually, child's living spontaneity is covered with layers of knowledge, rules, expectations, fears. person becomes smarter but loses wisdom, gains more possibilities but less joy. What if growing up process is not only acquisition, but also loss? What if true maturity is not accumulation of experience, but return to original simplicity? Not complication, but simplification. Not adding new layers, but removing old ones. Tao Te Ching speaks of pu, uncarved wood. This is wood that hasn't yet become furniture, hasn't received function, hasn't acquired form. It can potentially become anything: chair, table, house, boat. But precisely because of this, it's more valuable than any specific thing. In its indefiniteness, infinite possibilities are hidden. Person is born as such uncarved wood. He can become anyone, choose any path, live any life. But society, family, school begin to carve him, make from him doctor or teacher, husband or wife, successful or unsuccessful. And with each role, with each definition, person loses something of his original freedom. Return to source is not regression to childhood, but restoration of childlike view of world. Not refusal of knowledge and experience, but their use without attachment. Ability to play any role without forgetting it's just a role. Ability to take life seriously without losing lightness of being. Practice of return begins with simple things. Try to eat like child, not thinking about calories and benefits, but simply enjoying taste, color, aroma, not hurrying, not distracted by conversations or thoughts. Be fully present in process of eating, and you'll understand what real hunger and real satiation are. Try to walk without purpose, not for health, not for sport, not to get somewhere. Simply go out and walk where legs carry. Stop when something attracts attention. Talk with cats, smell flowers, count clouds. Allow yourself to be useless, and you'll discover such walk is more useful than any training. Try to spend day without plans. Waking up, don't think about what needs to be done. Simply start doing what you want in given moment. Perhaps this will be ineffective from productivity point of view. But perhaps this will be very effective from point of view of understanding what you really want from life. The sage understands that return to source is not one-time action, but constant practice. Each day, world tries to make you more complex than you are. Each day, you accumulate new roles, obligations, definitions. And each day, it's important to cleanse from unnecessary, return to center. Remember who you really are. There's meditation he recommends to all seekers of simplicity. Sit comfortably and imagine you're removing clothes, but not physical, psychological. First, remove role of son or daughter, then role of worker, then role of husband or wife. Remove one by one all masks, all definitions, all labels that society hung on you or you hung on yourself. What remains when you've removed everything? Fear of emptiness or relief of freedom? Most people fear discovering that under all roles, there's nothing. But actually, there's everything there. There's one who was before all roles and who will be after them. One who doesn't depend on others' opinions, on successes and failures, on praise and condemnation. One who simply is. This is Pu, uncarved wood of your true nature. Not better and not worse than other people. Simply unique, unrepeatable, whole. Like snowflake is not better than another snowflake, but each has its own unique pattern. Like star is not more important than another star, but each has its own light. When you find this place in yourself, life becomes play. You can play any roles, but they no longer define you. You can rejoice in successes and grieve failures, but they no longer destroy your inner world. You can love people, but your love no longer depends on how they relate to you. This freedom is not selfish. On contrary, only free person can truly serve others, because he serves not from need to be needed, not from fear of being rejected, but from overflow of love. Like sun shines, not because someone asks it to, but because such is its nature. Return to source is also return to unity with nature, understanding that you're not separate, being fighting for survival in hostile world, but part of single organism of planet, universe, being. Your breath is connected with forests breathing, your heartbeat with rhythm of ocean waves, your thoughts with movement of clouds. When you feel this connection, loneliness disappears. Fear of death disappears because you understand you were never separate to die. Greed disappears because you understand everything already belongs to you. Anger disappears because you understand to be angry at another is like being angry at your left hand for not being right. This understanding doesn't come from books and not from reasoning. It comes from experience of return, from daily practice of removing masks, cleansing from unnecessary, returning to what was before all acquisitions and achievements, to that state in which child looks at world first time, every day. In every person there's a valley, quiet place where noises of external world don't reach, where there's no hurry and bustle, where time flows differently. Most people forget road to this valley, or don't even know of its existence. They live on surface, in world of events and reactions, plans and memories. But valley is always here, always waiting for return. The sage knows way to this valley, not because he studied maps or read guides, but because he never left it completely. Even in life's most turbulent times, part of him always remained in this quiet place, like part of tree always remains in earth, even when wind shakes its branches. Valley is not place in space, but state in consciousness, state of deep peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances. Peace deeper than sleep, because there's awareness in it. Silence fuller than any sounds, because it contains source of all sounds. Ancient Taoists called this state shu, emptiness. But this is not emptiness of absence, but emptiness of presence, like emptiness in wheel center that makes wheel useful, like emptiness inside cup that allows it to contain water, like emptiness in house that makes it fit for living. Without this emptiness, life becomes too dense, too filled. There's no room for new experience, new thoughts, new feelings. All space is occupied by old patterns, habitual reactions, familiar ways of thinking. Person becomes like overcrowded room where it's impossible to find what's needed, where there's no room for guests, where there's nothing to breathe. practice of emptiness begins with creating space in daily life. This can be 10 minutes in morning when you do nothing. Don't read news. Don't plan day. Don't solve problems. Simply sit and breathe. Allow yourself to be without purpose, without achievements, without meaning. At first, mind will resist. It's used to being busy. It fears emptiness. It will offer many important things that need to be done immediately. But if you gently, without struggle, return to breath, to simple presence, mind will gradually calm down. Like agitated water becomes transparent when you stop stirring it. In this transparency, glimpses of different state of consciousness begin to appear. Moments when thinker and thought become one, when breather and breath merge, when sitter and sitting cease to be separate processes. This is taste of unity that's impossible to describe in words, but once tasted is never forgotten. Gradually, these moments become longer, deeper, more accessible. You learn to enter valley not only during formal meditation, but in ordinary life, in conversation with another person, when you stop thinking about what to say next and simply listen. In work, when you stop worrying about result and simply do what you're doing. In walking, when you forget about goal and simply put one foot before another. This practice changes attitude to life. Events continue to happen, joyful and sad, easy and difficult, but you begin to perceive them as weather, sometimes sun, sometimes rain, sometimes wind, sometimes calm. Weather changes, but sky remains. Sky of your consciousness that can contain any weather without disturbing its peace. The sage teaches simple way to return to valley in any moment. When you feel you're losing balance, that emotions are capturing you, that thoughts are racing like horses without bridle, stop. Take 3 deep breaths. Don't think about problem. Don't seek solution. Just breathe. Feel how air enters lungs and exits from them. This is breath of valley that's always available, always here. There are other keys to valley. Observing nature, admiring sunset, listening to rain, contemplating fire, physical practices, Tai Chi, Qigong, slow walking, creativity, drawing, music, poetry, when they come not from mind, but from heart. Service to others, when it goes not from sense of duty, but from overflow of love. All these practices lead to one thing: restoration of connection with Source, with that place in consciousness where thoughts, feelings, desires are born, where there's no separation into I and world, into internal and external, into past and future, where there's only current moment in all its fullness and perfection. When you live from this valley, life becomes art. You stop fighting circumstances and begin dancing with them. Stop trying to control others and begin influencing them with your presence. Stop seeking happiness in future and find it in present. This doesn't mean passivity or indifference. On contrary, actions become more effective because they come not from worry or greed, but from clarity and love. Words become more precise because they come from silence, not from mind's noise. Relationships become deeper because you meet others not from need, but from fullness. Valley of Spirit is not place for escape from world, but source of strength for living in world. The deeper you immerse in it, the more fully you can participate in human drama without losing your center. Like actor who fully enters role but never forgets who he really is. The meeting happened by chance, as all important meetings in life happen. Autumn day, when maple leaves turned crimson and air was clear and fresh. Lao Tzu was returning from library carrying ancient scroll with reflections on music and ritual. Road led through small grove where among trees stood stone tables for playing Go and contemplation. At one table sat middle-aged man surrounded by group of students. He spoke about importance of education, about necessity of studying ancient texts, about how proper upbringing can make person noble. His voice was confident, manners refined, clothing indicated high position in society. This was Confucius, teacher whose name already thundered throughout China, reformer who wanted to return to country, golden age of ancient rulers through restoration of traditions, rituals, proper education, man of action who believed world could be corrected with help of knowledge and efforts. Lao Tzu didn't plan to stop, but something in Confucius's words made him listen, not because he agreed, but because he heard sincere care for people, genuine desire to make world better. And simultaneously, he heard what often accompanies good intentions, pride of mind that thinks it knows how life should be arranged. Confucius noticed man standing aside, and something in his calm presence attracted teacher's attention. He interrupted his speech and invited stranger to join conversation. So began meeting that would enter history as dialogue of two greatest sages of China. They spoke about much, about governance and justice, about human nature and goals of education, about past and future. But behind all these topics stood one main question: how to help people live better. And here their paths diverged like two rivers flowing from one source in different directions. Confucius believed in power of knowledge and effort. Study wisdom of ancestors, follow rules of propriety, develop your abilities, serve society. Anyone can become noble person if he applies sufficient effort. World's problems are from ignorance and lack of proper upbringing. Need more schools, more teachers, more books. Lao Tzu saw this differently. The more knowledge, the more pride, the more rules, the more violations, the more effort, the more tension. People suffer not from lack of education, but from excess of desires, not from not knowing rules, but from trying to control what cannot be controlled. Imagine a river, said Lao Tzu. Can you teach it to flow? Can you force it to be wet? River flows not because it studied hydraulics, but because such is its nature. And person can be wise and kind, not because he learned many rules, but because he returned to his original nature. But without rules, there will be chaos, objected Confucius. Without education, people will remain savages. Without effort, there will be no progress. Look at small child. If you don't teach him, he won't be able to read and write, won't understand what's good and what's bad. Look at same child, answered Lao Tzu. He knows how to love without textbooks on love. He knows how to rejoice without courses on joy. He knows how to forgive without studying ethics. Education can teach him many useful things, but it can also make him forget what he already knows with his heart. Conversation continued until evening. Confucius's students listened with amazement to this strange man who spoke things contradicting everything they studied. How can you govern without governing? How can you teach without teaching? How can you act without acting? And Lao Tzu looked with warmth at young teacher, in whom he saw sincere seeker of truth trapped by his own erudition. Confucius wanted to fix world, but didn't understand world is not broken. Wanted to teach people to be people, but didn't see they're already people. Wanted to bring order without noticing perfect order that already exists in nature. When they parted, Confucius said to his students, "Today I met a dragon. I know how birds and fish, beasts and people behave. But dragon is mystery. It rises to heavens on clouds and wind. Lao Tzu is like dragon." And Lao Tzu, returning home, thought about how differently people can be loved. You can love them as they are, trusting their inner wisdom. Or you can love them as they should become, trying to improve them. Both ways have right to exist. Both come from heart. But first leads to peace, second to worry. This meeting showed him that truth is not one, that there can be many paths to one goal, and each person must walk path that corresponds to his nature. Confucius, path of active service, education, gradual perfection of world through perfection of people. Lao Tzu, path of acceptance, non-action, return to source. World is large enough for both paths. Moreover, they complement each other like inhale and exhale, like day and night, like masculine and feminine principle. Without Confucian activism, world might plunge into chaos. Without Taoist acceptance, activism might turn into tyranny. Years later, when teachings of both sages spread throughout China, people understood there's no need to choose between them. On weekdays, you can be Confucian, active, responsible, educated, and in moments of rest, Taoist, calm, natural, simple. In work, follow Confucius's rules and rituals. In personal life, seek Lao Tzu's way and harmony. So, two great teachings intertwined in Chinese culture like two threads in one fabric. And perhaps precisely in this interweaving, in this balance of opposites, lies special wisdom of China, ability not to choose between extremes, but to find harmony between them. Meeting with Confucius reminded Lao Tzu that wisdom is not in being right, but in understanding, that each teacher says exactly what certain people need to hear at certain time, and that true sage doesn't argue with other teachers, but rejoices in diversity of paths leading to one goal: liberation from suffering and attainment of inner peace. Decision to leave ripened long, like fruit ripens on tree. Not suddenly, not from some external event, but as natural completion of one stage and beginning of another. Lao Tzu lived long life among people. He served in library, taught those who came to him for advice, wrote his book about Tao, but inside understanding grew that his mission in human world was finished. The sage always knew that words are only pointers to moon, not moon itself. That teaching is boat for crossing river, but when river is crossed, boat must be left. His book was written, his understanding transmitted to those who could accept it. Now time to release even this understanding and return to source of all teachings, to silent Tao. Age also played its role. Body became weaker. World of people seemed more and more noisy and bustling. Not from fatigue or disappointment, he felt need for solitude, but from overflow, like cup that filled to brim and can no longer contain anything. Time came to become empty cup again. He didn't announce his decision to anyone. Simply one morning, when air was especially fresh and sun painted mountains in golden tones, he packed few things in travel bag and set out on journey to west, where beyond mountains lay unknown lands, where one could dissolve in nature and never return to world of people. Road was long and difficult, mountain paths, crossings of turbulent rivers, nigh under open sky, but each step carried him further from familiar world and closer to that boundary where known ends and mystery begins. He walked slowly, stopped to rest by springs, admired clouds, talked with birds. There was nowhere to hurry. Time no longer had power over him. At kingdom's border stood border post. Here they checked travelers' documents, collected duties, maintained order. Head of post was man named Yin Shi, guardian of border, but not only geographical. He was of those rare people who understand there are more important borders than between countries, between knowledge and wisdom, between words and silence, between temporal and eternal. When Lao Tzu approached post, Yin Shi immediately understood that before him was no ordinary traveler. In Old Man's Gait was special lightness, in eyes depth of mountain lake, in presence that peace radiated only by true sages. Guardian of border, long waited for such meeting. He studied ancient texts, meditated, sought teacher who could show him way to truth. Honorable teacher, said Yin Shi, stopping Lao Tzu, I see you're leaving our world to merge with Tao. But is it fair to take with you wisdom that could help many generations? I ask you, leave us at least few words about what you understood. Lao Tzu smiled. He understood this meeting was not accidental, that perhaps his entire long journey to border was intended precisely for this moment, to transmit last gift to humanity. Not new teaching, not addition to already written book, but living example of how wisdom passes from heart to heart. Good, answered Sage, but what can I say that I haven't already said? Tao, that can be expressed in words, is not true Tao. Everything that can be written is only shadow of reality, reflection of moon in water. You ask me to catch wind in net, or stop river in jug. Then tell not about Tao, asked Yin Shi. Tell about how to live in accord with it, about how ordinary person can find way to wisdom, about how ruler can govern country without destroying its harmony, about how sage can serve world without attaching to results. And then Lao Tzu agreed to stay for few days. He settled in simple room at post, and each morning, when sun rose over mountains, he told Yin Shi about what he understood over long years of life, not as teacher, but as older brother, sharing experience with younger. He spoke about water that teaches softness and constancy, about mountains that teach patience and stability, about sky that teaches impartiality and acceptance, about earth that teaches generosity and fertility. Each element of nature was for him book of wisdom, written by hand of Tao itself. he told about paradoxes of wisdom, that wisest knows he knows nothing, that strongest wins without fighting, that richest is content with little, that most influential governs without forcing. These paradoxes cannot be understood by mind. They can only be lived. He explained principle of non-action, Wu-Wei, how to act in accord with natural course of things without disturbing their harmony, like gardener who doesn't force plants to grow, but creates conditions for their growth, like mother who doesn't force child, but with love directs his development. Yin Xi recorded these conversations, trying not to lose one important word. So second part was born of what will later be called Tao Te Ching, practical guide for applying principles of Tao in daily life. If first part of book was about nature of way itself, second was about how to walk this way. The sage spoke about qualities of true ruler. He must be like valley, accepting, fertile, located lower than surrounding hills. People should flow to him naturally, like water flows to lowland. His power should be invisible, like action of Tao. Best ruler is one about whom people say, "We did everything ourselves." He explained 3 treasures of sage: compassion, moderation, and humility. Compassion gives strength to protect weak. Moderation gives possibility to be generous. Humility allows to become first while remaining last. These qualities cannot be developed by willpower. They can only be discovered in yourself by removing everything that prevents them. Days passed in these conversations, but Lao Tzu understood that most important things are transmitted not by words, but by presence. Yin Xi learned not only by listening, but by observing how sage eats, how he walks, how he's silent, how he laughs. In every gesture was wholeness, in every glance, depth, in every truth born from experience, not from knowledge. When time came for farewell, Yin Xi understood he received more than he asked. He asked for words and received living example of wisdom, asked for teaching and received transmission from heart to heart, asked for book and received key to book written by life itself. Lao Tzu gave him scrolls with records and set out further west. Some say he reached India and became teacher there, others that he dissolved in mountains, merging with Tao, still others that he became immortal, and still wanders world, helping those who seek way. But perhaps all this is not so important. What's important is that his teaching remained. 81 verses about nature of Tao and about how to live in accord with it. Words that seem simple, but can be understood ever deeper with each reading. Pointers to Moon that help see what's impossible to show directly. And what's important is that road to West continues. Everyone who understands essence of Lao Tzu's teaching, sooner or later, sets out on their own journey beyond borders of known world. Not necessarily geographical borders, but borders of habitual thinking, limited perception, small self. This journey can last years, or happen in one instant, can lead to distant lands, or into depths of own heart. But goal is same for all, to return home, where there never was separation between seeker and sought, between way and wayfarer, between Tao and one who walks Tao. Wisdom lives not in books, but in people's hearts. And when sage leaves, his teaching doesn't disappear, but begins its own life. Like seed thrown into earth gives shoots in most unexpected places, Tao Te Ching became such seed that sprouted in all corners of Chinese culture and far beyond its borders. After Lao Tzu's departure to West, his teaching was transmitted not through schools and institutes, but from heart to heart. Yin Shi, who received sage's last instructions, became first in long chain of transmission. He copied scrolls, shared understanding with those ready to listen, but most importantly, he himself lived in accordance with principles of Tao. So appeared first Taoist masters, people who not just studied texts, but embodied them in life. They lived simply, spoke little, but their presence changed everything around. Like flower doesn't try to be fragrant, but its aroma spreads by itself. So these masters didn't preach, but their calm and wisdom naturally transmitted to others. Among them were hermits who went to mountains to live in unity with nature. They built simple huts by waterfalls, meditated in caves, studied movement of clouds and flight of cranes. Their life was poem without words, prayer without rituals, teaching without textbooks. They understood that best way to know Tao is to dissolve in it completely. There were also those who remained among people, doctors, advisors, artists, simple craftsmen. They didn't wear special clothes, didn't declare themselves sages. But in their work, something special was felt. Doctor healed not only diseases, but restored harmony in patient's life. Advisor gave advice that seemed simple, but worked like magic. Artist created paintings in which there was more silence than colors. Gradually, Taoist principles penetrated all spheres of Chinese life. In architecture appeared gardens where every stone and every plant were arranged in accordance with natural flow of energy. House was built not for show of wealth, but for harmony with surrounding nature. Windows were positioned to see moon and mountains. Rooms were made simple, but filled with light and air. In poetry, new themes sounded, not only heroic deeds and romantic passions, but quiet joy of simple moments. Poets wrote about how snow falls, how peach blossoms, how old man sits by pond with fishing rod. In these poems, there were few words but much space for reflection. Reader should not simply understand meaning, but feel state poet wanted to convey. Painting also changed. Taoist artists drew not what they saw with eyes, but what they felt with heart. Their landscapes were full of mist and empty space that was no less important than mountains and trees. They understood that beauty is not in details, but in overall mood, not in accuracy of image, but in picture's ability to evoke in viewer experience of unity with nature. Music enriched with sounds of silence. Taoist musicians valued pauses between notes no less than notes themselves. They created melodies that flowed like stream, without tension and bustle. Listening to such music, person didn't get excited, but calmed down, didn't analyze, but simply dissolved in sound flow. But especially brightly, Taoist philosophy manifested in martial arts. It would seem what's common between teaching about non-violence and art of combat? But ancient masters understood that true strength is not in aggression, but in harmony. They created styles based on water's principles: flexibility, fluidity, ability to go around obstacles and use opponents' strength against himself. Tai Chi became moving meditation, slow, smooth movements that repeat water's flow, birds' flight, plants' growth. Practitioner of Tai Chi doesn't train muscles, but learns to feel internal energy Qi. He doesn't fight with body, but cooperates with it. Doesn't overcome nature's laws, but follows them. Qigong developed these principles even further. This is not simply physical exercises, but way of harmonizing entire being. Breath, movement, attention merge into single flow. Practitioner learns not only to manage energy in his body, but to feel connection with universe's energy. He becomes channel through which life force flows. These practices showed that Tao philosophy is not abstract reflections, but guide to action. That non-action doesn't mean passivity, but harmonious activity. That softness can be stronger than hardness, not only in theory, but in practice. Medicine also absorbed Taoist principles. Doctors understood that it's necessary to treat not symptoms, but causes, not to fight disease, but to restore balance in organism. They studied energy flow along meridians, learned to read pulse-like book about whole person's condition, used acupuncture and herbs not to suppress disease, but to awaken organism's own healing powers. Even in cooking, Taoist approach appeared. Preparing food became art of harmony, not only of tastes, but of energies. Products were combined not only by principle of tasty, but by principle of useful for balance in organism. Food became not simply fuel for body, but way of maintaining harmony between person and nature. Family relationships also changed under influence of Taoist wisdom. Parents learned not to control children, but to create conditions for their natural development. Spouses practiced art of being together while preserving individuality. Elders transmitted wisdom, not through orders, but through personal example. Merchants applied Tao principles in business, understanding that honesty is more profitable than deceit, that reputation is more important than quick profit, that satisfied customer will bring new buyers. Craftsmen worked not in haste, but in rhythm that corresponded to nature of their work. Potter followed clay's plasticity, weaver rhythm of his hands, blacksmith breath of fire. So Taoism became not separate religion or philosophical school, but way of life that any person could adopt regardless of profession, social position, or other beliefs. It didn't contradict Confucianism or Buddhism, but complemented them. Like silence complements music, like rest complements work. Monasteries and temples built in honor of Lao Tzu became places not of worship, but of practice. People came there not to pray to sage, but to learn to live as he lived. Not to ask for miracles, but to discover miracle of ordinary life lived consciously and harmoniously. Holidays in honor of Tao were celebrations of simplicity. People didn't arrange lavish ceremonies, but gathered together to share silence, sit by water, observe clouds. They understood that best way to honor teaching is to live in accordance with it. Taoist masters created entire system of knowledge, transmission based not on memorizing texts, but on personal experience. Student lived near teacher, observed how he works, rests, communicates with people. Most important lessons were transmitted in silence, through joint activity, through creating situations in which student could discover Tao principles himself. This tradition of living transmission has survived to present day. Even now, 2,500 years after Lao Tzu, in China's mountains, live hermits who practice same art of unity with Tao. In cities, work Tai Chi masters who every morning teach people to move in harmony with nature. In hospitals, doctors use methods based on ancient understanding of energy flows in organism. And everywhere where there are people seeking peace and wisdom, traces of Lao Tzu's teaching are found. Not necessarily in form of quotes or rituals, but in form of living understanding that life can be simple and deep simultaneously. That strength can be soft, wisdom simple, and happiness natural state of one who lives in harmony with Tao. Legacy of Silence is not museum of ancient truths, but living source from which each generation can draw what it needs. And this source never runs dry, because it's fed not from past, but from ever-flowing present, where Tao continues its silent movement through world. Morning of 21st century comes not as morning of Lao Tzu's times. Instead of roosters singing, alarm clocks and notifications, instead of mist over river, smog over cities. Instead of mountain silence, constant noise of cars, planes, air conditioners, world became faster, more complex, louder. But need for wisdom, for peace, for understanding life's meaning remained the same. Modern person lives in information flow that never stops. News, messages, advertising, social media, everything demands attention. Everything screams about its importance. Mind gets used to jumping from one thought to another, like monkey jumps from branch to branch. To concentrate becomes harder than ever in human history. In this world, ancient wisdom of Tao Te Ching sounds especially relevant, not as exotic philosophy of distant past, but as practical guide for survival in modern chaos. Principles. Lao Tzu discovered observing nature work in world of technology too. Water is still softer than stone. Silence still deeper than noise. Simplicity still wiser than complexity. Take modern persons, morning. He wakes from sharp sound of alarm, immediately grabs phone, checks messages, reads news. His day begins with anxiety, haste, information overload. What if we try differently? Wake few minutes earlier, lie in silence, feel your body, listen to breath. This is return to Tao in simplest form. Breakfast, too, can be turned into practice. Instead of eating on the go, reading news, or planning day, try to eat slowly, attentively. Feel taste of food, its texture, aroma. This is not loss of time, but it's gaining. Moment of conscious presence is worth hours of unconscious bustle. On way to work, most people either hurry or are immersed in phones. What if we walk or ride as meditation? Observe breath, notice sky, trees, people's faces. Not analyze, not plan. Simply be here and now. Even in subway or traffic jam, you can find island of silence inside yourself. Work often becomes source of stress. Deadlines, competition, necessity to constantly prove competence. But here too, Taoist principles can be applied. Do what's needed without creating unnecessary tension. Cooperate. Don't compete. Be effective, not just busy. Listen, not just speak. One of modernity's biggest problems is multitasking. People try to do several things simultaneously, and as a result, don't do any well. Taoist approach is opposite. Do one thing at a time, fully immersing in it. When you write, only write. When you listen, only listen. When you walk, only walk. Technologies can be both obstacle and helper in Tao practice. Internet can disperse attention or give access to wisdom of ages. Phone can create dependency or serve as reminder of present moment's importance. Everything depends on how we use these tools, consciously or unconsciously. There's simple practice for modern people. Every hour, pause for 1 minute. Set reminder on phone, and when it works, simply stop. Doesn't matter what you're doing, reading, working, talking. Take 3 deep breaths. Feel your body. Return to present moment. This minute can change entire day. Relationships, too, can be built on Tao principles. Instead of trying to change partner, accept him as he is. Instead of proving your rightness, listen and understand. Instead of demanding love, give it unconditionally. This is not passivity, but wise activity that creates harmony in relationships. Raising children in modern world can also follow Taoist principles. Don't force child to be what he isn't, but help him reveal his nature. Don't overload him with developing activities, but give time and space for natural growth. Don't compare with others, but value his uniqueness. Health in age of stress and pollution requires special attention. Taoist approach to health: prevention is better than cure, harmony more important than strength, relaxation more effective than tension. Simple practices, Qigong, Tai Chi, meditation, proper breathing can be more effective than expensive medicines and procedures. Success in modern understanding is often connected with accumulation of money, power, fame. Taoist understanding of success is different. It's harmony, inner peace, ability to be happy regardless of external circumstances. Paradox is that such approach often leads to external success too, but without destroying inner world. Ecological problems of modernity are rooted in human alienation from nature. Taoism offers path of return to unity with surrounding world, not as resource for use, but as home of which we're part. Every tree, every river, every animal has right to exist, no less than human. Globalization created world where all are connected with all, but few feel this connection. Taoist understanding of unity of all existing can help overcome separation between peoples, cultures, religions, not through unification, but through recognition that diversity is manifestation of single Tao. Loneliness became epidemic of modernity. People are surrounded by other people, but feel isolated. Taoist practice helps understand that true loneliness is impossible because we're always connected with whole, and true connection with others is possible only when you're connected with yourself. Depression and anxiety often arise from attempt to control what cannot be controlled. Acceptance of what is doesn't mean passivity. It means wise use of energy, direct effort, where something can be changed, and accept what cannot be changed. Search for life's meaning is especially acute in society where traditional values blur. Tao offers meaning that doesn't depend on external circumstances. Find your place in life's general flow. Be yourself. Serve harmony of whole. Modern practices based on ancient wisdom adapt to new conditions. Meditation through mobile apps, online Tai Chi courses, virtual communities of practitioners. Form changes, but essence remains same. Return to source, to silence, to unity. And at end of day, when modern person lies down to sleep under city noise, he can find same silence ancient sages found under starry sky. Because silence is not in absence of sounds, but in presence of peace. And this peace is always here, always available, always waiting for return. Tao doesn't become outdated because it doesn't belong to any epoch. It belongs to life as such. And while there are people seeking wisdom and peace, Lao Tzu's teaching will be living, relevant, necessary, not as museum exhibit, but as living source from which everyone can draw what they need in given moment. Way home begins from place where you are now, from this moment, from this breath, from this thought. No need to go to distant countries or read complex books. No need to become saint or sage. need simply to return to who you really are, to that state that was before all layers, before all roles, before all fears and desires. Return to Tao is return to silence, not to muteness, but to that deep silence from which all sounds are born, to that emptiness fuller than any fullness, to that peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, because it is foundation of all circumstances. This silence is always here, in pause between inhale and exhale, in gap between thoughts, in instant between past and future. It doesn't come and doesn't go. It simply is. And when you find it, you understand you never lost it, that it was with you always. You were just too busy to notice it. In this silence, there are no problems to solve, goals to achieve, roles to play. There's only pure being, simple, natural, perfect, like breath, like heartbeat, like change of day and night, without effort, without tension, without resistance. And from this silence, new life begins. Not different life, but same one seen anew. As if all your life you looked at world through murky glass, and now glass became transparent. People are same, events are same, but everything is filled with meaning, beauty, sacredness. Work becomes play. Obligations become pleasure. Problems become tasks. Meetings become gifts. Because you no longer do something to get something in return. You do because doing it is natural, joyful, right. Like bird sings, not to get applause, but because singing is its nature. Relationships become dance. You don't try to lead or follow, but simply move in common rhythm. Don't try to get love, but give it. Don't demand understanding, but understand. Don't seek support, but support. And surprisingly, receive everything needed without asking for it. Time ceases to be enemy. Past no longer pursues you with regrets. Future doesn't frighten with uncertainty. Only present remains, infinitely deep, infinitely rich, infinitely sufficient. In it fits entire life from birth to death, and even more. Death ceases to be scary. Not because you believe in something after death, but because you understand death is simply transition from one state to another, like sleep after waking, like winter after autumn, like exhale after inhale, natural, necessary, beautiful. New understanding of happiness is born, not as achievement of something external, but as internal state, not as result of efforts, but as gift of presence, not as reward for correct behavior, but as natural state of one who lives in harmony with Tao. This happiness doesn't depend on circumstances. It can be in wealth and in poverty, in health and in sickness, in success and in failure, because its source is not in external world, but in depth of own being, where it's always spring, always sun, always peace. And then you understand journey is finished, not because you arrived somewhere, but because you understood you were always home. Tao need not be sought, because you are Tao. Way need not be found, because you are Way. Truth need not be known, because you are truth. This is not end, but beginning, not achievement, but starting point, not answer, but question that no longer needs to be asked, because life itself becomes answer. Each moment, each breath, each heartbeat. And in this return to source, there's special joy. Joy of recognition, meeting with one you long awaited. Like child rejoices, returning home after long journey. Everything is familiar, everything in its place, everything filled with warmth and love. Tao Te Ching says, return to source is called peace. Peace is called return to destiny. Return to destiny is called constancy. Knowledge of constancy is called enlightenment. And in these simple words, entire wisdom of life is hidden. Entire way from birth to death and back to birth. Entire road from search to finding, and from finding to simple being. Entire circle from complexity to simplicity, from knowledge to wisdom, from doing to non-action. Circle closes, but this is not end of story. This is beginning of new story, written by everyone who finds way home. Story without words, but full of meaning. Without events, but full of life. Without beginning and end, but full of eternity. This story continues in every heart that opens to silence, in every mind that stops fighting with life, in every soul that remembers who it really is. And while there are such hearts, minds, and souls, Lao Tzu's teaching will be living, way will be open, and road home will always be here. Breathe calmly. Way is finished. Way begins. Welcome home.